Well, what it was like, I remember the first time that I picked up a drink, not to drink, just out of curiosity. I was like 6, and my mom had this bottle next to her bed, and in my mind, I thought it was just water. And then I took a sip out of it and found out that it wasn't water, and my mouth was on fire, and I just like let it drain out onto the floor and continued on with life. But the next time around, I was like 10, and it was at my dad's wedding reception for his second marriage. He'd gotten married a third time after that. But I remember I was allowed access to the grape wine and I was enjoying it. And he saw that I was enjoying it too much, so he politely cut me off. And at the time, I was not happy about it. But then the morning after, the people that he didn't cut off made me happy that I got cut off because they were not enjoying life at all. And then, see, further down the road, I I still I wasn't really trying to drink for drink's sake, but I remember there was always like a bottle of Boone's Farm in my dad's refrigerator whenever I went to visit. They got separated when I was like 5 or 6. But I always had quick and easy access to them whenever I wanted to spend time with them. And let's see, the beginning of the actual journey started somewhere along the lines when we moved to Staten Island. I'm originally from New York, and we lived in the Bronx for the longest time. That's, for those who don't know, those are just 2 of the 5 boroughs of New York City. And when we moved to Staten Island, I remember it was a fresh new experience for me because I had always lived in houses, except for like early on when my mom and dad were together and they lived in an apartment. But we went to live in these apartments, and I remember looking out at the street during the daytime, and it looked all clean and nice and fresh and wonderful, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And then the sun went down, and things changed. And I was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to like it here so much. How soon can we get out of here? But it wasn't a situation where we could just like up and leave. So what wound up happening, when in Rome, as they say, do as the Romans do, and what wound up happening was the first person who became my friend was the son of the neighborhood drunk. And the first decent story, because I don't really have a lot of decent drunk stories. I have more decent sober stories. We'll get to those. But the first decent drunk story went to his mom's birthday party. And I had already started drinking and started, playing with outside issues, along with that. And I remember coming around the corner, they had a DJ there, it was, all fun and everybody was enjoying themselves. And I remember it was around 2 in the morning, I came around the corner and there was this table filled with half-drunken glasses of liquor. And I was like, oh. And so I figured, okay, well, let me go about the business of seeing how much of this stuff I can wipe out. And that was when I found out that I was a blackout drunk, because I've been a blackout drunk for the rest of my time in drunkenness. I was told later on, the first shot at it, like I said, I blacked out. And I came to, and half of the room was holding me away from him, and half of the room was holding him away from me, because I was later told that during said blackout, that I felt the need to relieve myself on his coffee table. Oh, God. And when asked what I was doing, because he asked me what I was doing, at which point I blithely turned to him and said, I'm urinating on your coffee table, and continued to urinate on his coffee table. So, not that stopped us from being friends, because that's just, Saturday. But we moved on from there, and some time passed, and I had gotten a scholarship to go to college, went to college for a year and a half, and it was getting in the way of my drinking, so I was like, okay, well, let's just go out and get a job. So I had an next-door neighbor help me get a job, and wound up, oversleeping that job after a period of time. And then for a while I was just, subsisting under the care of my mother, who was disabled at the time. And she, came to me and said, hey, I can't keep this up. You need to do something, like, get a job or something. And I had already planned on joining the military anyway. And it turned out that I had a cousin who had just come out of Marine Corps boot camp, and he was doing the thing, because they have this thing where they let you get an extra couple of weeks off or a month off doing, bringing in recruits. So he was a recruiter's assistant. So I said, okay, yeah, fine, I'll do that. And originally my idea was to join the Army, because they didn't strike me as people that had to work really hard. But the thing was, he was in the Marines, and it's like I forgot at the time. For those who don't know, there was this group called the Guardian Angels who used to patrol the subways in New York to try to keep people safe, because there was just way too much stuff going on for the cops to handle by themselves. And he was one of them. So he was a badass before he showed up. Me, not so much. But I grew into badassery at a later point. But so that led me into, I just remember the recruiter told me, just, you want to get through this, okay, just move as fast as you can, do whatever they tell you as soon as they tell you. And I did that, and I got through. And I almost got a meritorious promotion out of boot camp, but that wound up not working out. So I went to school, and what I wound up getting was a meritorious promotion at school. And that was just amazing to me, in retrospect, because the class before me for the number one position, they were fighting between like 99.98 and 99.96 or something like that. And I was first in my class with a 94. So that was just my first hand experience with God having a hand on my situation. So from there, I was told that at some point you're going to have to go to Okinawa. So I was like, okay, well, they're playing in the desert right now, and I'm not trying to dodge bullets. I'm just here because I need a paycheck. I'm going to Okinawa. So I went to Okinawa, and that was a grand time to be had by all. They had a beer machine in the lobby. I was in heaven. And, the liquor was super cheap. And that's how that went. And not too much challenging happened over there, because lots of people got into trouble, for drinking or various things over there, and they just kind of, dealt with it, but nothing too serious. So I came back stateside, and I was stationed at Camp Lejeune in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And I remember the first morning, I was summoned out of bed. And I say summoned, but they turn the lights on, you have to make a whole bunch of noise. And I'm still hungover. I'm not trying to get up or anything, because I don't know how things work here, until I found out how things work there. And then this guy who was in charge of one of the other units politely came over to me and turned over my mattress. So I'm on the floor. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll get up now. And as it happened, because God has a terrific sense of humor, the guy who did that was sober, and he wound up being my temp sponsor when I was getting out of treatment. So leading into treatment, I had gotten into some situations. Mostly the primary issue I seemed to have run across was an inability to find my way to the place where you're actually supposed to relieve yourself, and I just relieved myself random places. So they'd wake me up Sunday morning, say, hey, get a mop, and you made a mess over there, you need to clean it up. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but just to keep the peace, I'll just take care of this. So what wound up happening was, one day, my last remaining friend, who was also my bunkmate, who was also from New York, I'd get rides up there from time to time whenever I went home to visit. There was a day that I had duty. I was on duty, and I was supposed to be off for 4 hours, and I'd just gotten off at 8 o'clock, and I was supposed to be coming back on at midnight, and I told him I was going to just head down to the club, and he was like, sitting up there on the top rock trying to tell me how much of a bad idea this was. And to me, he was just like so many Peanuts adults, and, adults on Peanuts cartoon, just wah, 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 wah. I didn't hear a word he had to say. So I went to the club, came back a couple hours later, crashed out. They pulled me out of bed at midnight, so I'm sitting at the desk. And finally, after about like a half hour, 3/4 of an hour, I just nodding off at the desk. And then finally I was like, forget this nonsense. So I politely took the logbook, clutched it to my heart, and laid on my bed at the end of the squad bay. And then I woke up the next morning. It was around 6:30, and everybody else had been up for about an hour and a half. And I remember something told me to take a look at the logbook. So I looked at the logbook, and of course the officer of the day came through at about 10 minutes to 3, about 2:50 a.m. And I don't remember what his log entry was. All I saw were the words at the end that said, "big problem." So I was like, okay, so I know what I need to do. I need to cop to having a problem because I have a history of having a problem. They were making me go to these meetings and getting this piece of paper signed. So I went up and said, okay, help me. I got problems. I need help. And so then they sent me up to go to treatment. And of course, as I tell people still today, if I knew that all I was going to get was a $100 fine, because my main thing was I was concerned about getting reduced in rank, because a reduce in rank means a reduce in money and a reduce in my ability to drink, and that was just not acceptable. But I found out later on that all I was going to get was a $100 fine. If I knew that all I was going to get was a $100 fine, I'd probably be dead today. Because there was a period of 6 months before I went into treatment, and I just, got into other trouble. I wound up, relieving myself in somebody's refrigerator while we were out, playing cards or whatever. And I, my response was the same. He asked me, what were you doing? I was like, I'm peeing in your refrigerator. But I continued on, and just before I was about to go into treatment, they had just come back from exercises in Korea, and I went into the office with the first sergeant, and he had a bottle of Canadian Mist, and I cracked the bottle of Canadian Mist with my first sergeant and knocked off the neck of it. And he had to stop me because I was like, this is good stuff, and I didn't have to pay for it. Okay, but so that was the end of that. And I remember, as I'm often telling people, it was like I had a third step experience before I knew what a third step experience was, because I had my last drink at 8:30 a.m. July 29th, 1985, and the van showed up to take me into treatment at 9:45. And as I'm walking across the courtyard to get into the van, I just had the thought enter into my head, I guess this is it. Nothing heavy duty. I was just like, oh, okay. I just resigned myself to the situation. And later on, I just noticed that there were just some changes that were taking place, even though I hadn't full blown gone through steps. But I just noticed there was just a change in things. Just like things would happen that I would normally think were the end of the world, and I would just take it in my stride. I remember one time I was still smoking at the time, and I had my last $14 and a pack of cigarettes, and then the empty pack of cigarettes, I put it on the tray while we were at the chow hall, and it just went into the scullery, and I was like, oh, I don't have any money left. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll still have food until I get paid again, and I'll get paid again, and it'll be fine. So I can't leave without the antabuse story, because I had a recent addendum to it. During the period of time when I was just getting a piece of paper signed, going to meetings, not really paying attention, or actually kind of paying attention, to the best of my ability, I'll say paying attention, because I would end meetings and walk up to people, and we all know they say how it works at the beginning of every meeting. I would walk up to the people at the end of the meeting and say, so what is this program that you guys are talking about? And they would just smile and walk away, and I was like, oh, it's kind of rude. Maybe somebody else will tell me later. Of course, like I said, how it works, beginning of every meeting. I wasn't ready. And I went to treatment at Bethesda Naval Hospital, and I was there during the same time that Reagan got shot, and never got a chance to, visit or play cards or anything because, we were in the locked wing. So that was just not happening. But what I got was a taste for life in the DC area, and I really, 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 really enjoyed it. So after some time had passed, and it was time for me to decide if I was going to re-enlist or not. So I decided, well, okay, I'll just transfer up to Quantico, where I could be permanent party at the basic school where we train our officers, and I'll be like right down the road from DC. And I was able to go to some of the same meetings I went to while I was in treatment, really enjoyed, and it was my first bit of making a connection with you lovely people and finding out just how twisted you actually were, and also how giving you actually are of your time and your talent, and in some cases your money. Not that I would bum money from people, but like we'd go out to eat after a meeting and I might not have money for food, and somebody would see that and they'd just call for money for my food. And so, we do the pay it forward thing. So now if I'm going out with folks after a meeting and there's somebody who's, struggling, I'll pay for their food because that's what they did for me. And that's the thing. I had this thought rolling around in my head from yesterday, and it's a constant ongoing thought that, the amazingness of how this program was put together, basically using our character defect of selfishness for the benefit of ourselves and other people. Because when we first started doing this thing, because when I first got sober, we still smoked in meetings, and some meetings were just we stacked the folding chairs, and that was one of the first pieces of service that they told me to dump ashtrays, fold chairs, because, well, A, it gets you outside of yourself, and B, you get a chance to possibly run into other people who are dumping ashtrays and folding chairs, and maybe having brief conversations with people that you would not normally talk to. So therefore, getting you into the habit, or getting me into the habit of interacting with you guys. Otherwise, it would have been a situation of, me walking into any given meeting and no one's friendly here. They don't want to talk to me. Gee, I wonder why. I got this great body language. But eventually, and now I've grown to a point where, like I tell people, whenever I'm going into a new area, it is my job to insert myself into your life to whatever level that you are willing to allow it. And as I was saying before, it's something that we do not because we're saints, not because we're trying to become saints, not because we're these holy high people. We just don't want to die today. And from that's where we start, and eventually we get to a point where it goes from not just not wanting to die today, but also not just the joy of experiencing life, actually experiencing life, as opposed to before we were just existing, or at least I was. I don't know about you guys, because I've heard of people who show up for this deal and their life was already great before they got here, and they just did something embarrassing and decided to get sober. Not me. Well, I did do something embarrassing and wound up getting sober. But that wasn't the plan initially. Initially, the plan was go to treatment and just get these people off my back. And maybe if it doesn't take, I can always just go back to drinking. Because like they say in the book, if you don't think this is working for you, we will gladly refund you your misery, and you are more than happy to go back to what was working so well for you before. So it's not just getting to experience life for myself. It's the joy of seeing other people get to experience life and knowing that maybe, just maybe, you had a little bit of contribution into their growth. And I remember the first time that I got a real sense of that. There was this young lady in Northern Virginia, where the meetings where I went to, Rebos and Dumfries, Virginia. And I remember when I first saw her, she just struck me as, she looked like she had been ridden hard and put away wet at 14. And at some point years later, I saw her just coming out of the mall in this nice looking pantsuit. She just graduated from some business college or whatever. And I'm like, oh, awesome, good on you. Knowing that I, just a little bit of assistance in making that happen, that's great. Because the thing is, you can get all the help that you want and it's here for you, but if you don't do the work, nothing happens. There's a limit to what you get from this deal through osmosis. And trust and believe, I was all about hitting that limit as long as I could. But eventually, I got to a point where I was just really uncomfortable. And I remember there was this one night when talking to this guy who was my temp sponsor, like I said, and I was like 60 days in, and I came to him and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I just know I don't feel real good right now. And, you're supposed to help me. So help me. So turns out that he was going over to his house to have some friends over to play cards. They politely put me in another room with a cup of coffee sitting in front of a television, and I was fine. It's like, that's all I needed. And that's the thing. It's like, I don't always know what I need, but my higher power, whom I choose to call God just because it's easier, 3 words, it does. It knows what I need. And it will gladly give me what I need. And I can also refuse said help, should I so choose to refuse said help, to my detriment, or to my discomfort, we'll say. See. Okay, so this is the part where we go through steps. Oh, remember steps. Admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Got it. Okay, yeah, I remember the first time I went through the first 3 steps, it was like, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. I'm a drunk. Got it. Second step, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I'm crazy. Got it. Third step, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Wait a minute. I didn't know this was a God thing. I thought you were going to show me some technique so I could drink like a gentleman. Or something that would allow me to not want to do damage to myself or other people from not drinking or while drinking. And no, it turns out that it was actually a God thing. And, eventually, they used to say that, if God scares you away, alcohol will bring you back. And I didn't have to make it that far, but I know that to be a fact in the lives of a lot of people. The 4th step, where was I? Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. The first attempt that I did at a 4th step, I was in treatment, and it was a 1.5 pages. And here I thought I was rending my soul to the group. And at the end of it, they were like, that's all you got? And I'm like, no, but I just rended my soul. And they're like, do it over. And I'm like, okay, fine. So I came back with like 4 pages, which was a little bit more involved, we'll say. And the thing for me was, it was just cool, the idea that I could share these things with these people that I thought I would bring to my grave, or things that I just thought that they would run from the room screaming once they heard, and they just didn't. They were just like, oh, okay. And then I found out from later on, from going to a bunch of meetings, from sponsoring a bunch of people, from going to a bunch of different events here, there, and everywhere, that we are more the same than we are different. And that a lot of the things that one might be concerned about getting out might be just the thing that someone else needs to hear to get them off the ledge as they're sitting there suffering in silence. And the best way that I have ever had this described to me, there was this gentleman who sponsored me when I lived in Northern Virginia. And I refer to him as my gold-plated sponsor because he had this wonderful analogy. Actually, it was like, it can be used for the 5th step or for the 9th step. Yeah. That it's like, we open up this chest of horrible things that have gone on in our lives, horrible things that we have done, horrible things that were done to us, and we hand them to God. He dips them in gold, hands them back, and says, "Here, show this to somebody else." So I guess that would be where the fifth step part comes in, because like it says in the book, you could easily, talk yourself into being this wonderful, awesome thing, or you can even possibly con another individual, but something about another individual and God being part of the equation, it just seems like it brings more power to the interaction, and that's just the way it was. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And for me, that was just all about willingness. And step 7, humility, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. And the humbly part is the challenge that a lot of people have, as did I, because I'm perfect, I'm awesome, and I'm sorry you're feeling so bad, but just the truth was that there's a level of humility that is required in order for this to really work, to really kick off and get the job done. Step 8, made a list of persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And my 8th step list was not as long as some people's 8-step lists. Actually, as years go along, it gets longer, because as it's been said, if you were a drunk horse thief and you got sober, you're still a horse thief unless you make some changes, and that it's just about getting to the point of becoming willing to make amends to them all. And the willingness is and one thing that I found out, it's just continues to blow me away as often as I see it, that so often I can be willing to take a step, or I can be willing to take an action, and sometimes that is literally all the higher power is requiring for me. And I might blow this thing up in my head to be this big, horrible thing. And the reality is, it's like he's checking me. Just like, do you really want this? Do you really? Because if you really want this, you're going to have to do this. And I might be like, yeah, I really want this, but I don't really want to do that. But I know that doing that will get me to a point where I'm comfortable in my own skin. I drank because I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I participated in outside issues because I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I participated in rather lewd and lascivious activities because I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. And the cool thing about this deal is eventually you get to the point where you're comfortable in your own skin. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Oh yeah, one of the things that I forgot about step 8 is one of the things that a lot of people sometimes forget or minimize or make it not such a big deal, but it's actually a big deal, that one of the people on your amends list needs to be you. Because there is so much that we have done to ourselves under the guise of, it's like either A, I deserve that, or B, we were just trying to teach you a lesson, or C, you just really don't deserve forgiveness for that. And that reminds me of something. The willingness from step 8. I remember, I forget who said it, the first time I heard it, I thought it was silly until I wound up having to use it. And it's like, if you're not willing, the name of the game is to pray for the willingness to be willing. And I heard that and I was like, that just doesn't make any sense until you have to do it. When you have to do it, then it makes all the sense in the world, because praying for the willingness to get willing gets you willing, and then you can take the action that you need in order to increase the quality of your life. All right, so where was I going with that? Oh yeah, step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And one of the things that I was reminded earlier on is to remind yourself that you are one of the others. Like, I had a guy I was sponsoring that had ripped off a drug dealer, and he wanted to make amends to the drug dealer, and I was like, okay, you can do this, show up with a bag of money. I'm just saying, they might be a little bit more amenable to your story if they actually have proof that you're trying to do better. I'm just saying. All right, step 10. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. I don't know, I just came up in an era where it just seemed like everybody and their grandma had like these workbooks for step 10, like workbooks. And the problem with me with workbooks is it's got the word work in it. I'm not willing to work that hard. But then after paying attention to it, and I'm pretty sure I heard it in a meeting somewhere, and I've been using it for myself, that actually the 10th step only breaks down to 4 questions. Of course, I don't remember what the 4 questions are right now. Something like, it's like I want to guess, but I want to get it right, so hold on. Is it in here? Jinkies, I hope it's in here. Otherwise, I will just continue to be oh so much more embarrassed. All right. But anyway, there was 4 questions. So apparently it's not in here, so it must be in the big book. And all I needed to do was answer those 4 questions. And depending on how I answered those 4 questions would depend on at what level I'm operating at spiritually. I remember it was something like, did I intentionally harm somebody? Was I being dishonest? And I'd like, there were 2 more questions. And like on the days that I can answer, like 3 out of 4, I was good. I'm like, okay, cool. And on the days that it was more like 2 out of 4, I'm like, okay, I need to look at that and make some changes, make some things happen. And step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Knowledge of God's will. So many people will say, what is God's will? Because like, it's like you kind of know what your will is. You kind of know. You can try to massage your will into God's will, but you know. And for me, pretty much, the key indicator of God's will is that it's not particularly necessarily specifically regarding something that is beneficial to me as a person. Generally, it has something to do with helping somebody else, with doing something for somebody else, or doing something that will advance the bigger picture for other people. If I get to benefit from that, that's a secondary, but it's not the primary. And last but not least, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all affairs. We tried and we practiced. That's why they say progress, not perfection. It's not something that anybody's going to do perfectly all the time. You might have perfect days. I've had perfect days. You know, like those days when you go and take a BM and you pull out the toilet paper and it's clean. You're like, oh, it's a good day. So it's about moving forward with the best intentions. Moving forward with a heart for, like I say, a heart for other people, to give what we can, give what we're able, and to pass on the word of this deal to the best of our ability. And that was one of the things that I had heard earlier on, and I've come to believe it to be true. It's very possible that you are the only copy of the big book that anyone will ever see. So in that frame of mind, it is best to operate as one who is at least trying to practice these principles in all our affairs. Because, like, one of the things I like to mention, whenever I finally got through my first run of all 12 steps, I remember I saw that and I had finally, well, not that I had finally gotten there, I'd gotten close to there. Because my mindset was, I will practice these principles in all of my affairs regarding you, lovely people. Those thumb-sucking pinheads out there, they're on their own. But then what started happening, as you will find will start to happen, is this stuff just starts to bubble up in you, and it just like overspills into classmates and co-workers and random people you see at a bus stop and random people you see at Kroger that you see are having a bad time. And you're just like, and part of that is the growth of a connection with the higher power that we get through step 11 that makes us more sensitive to the needs of other people. Not that we're out here to play, Captain Save-A-Bro and, just try and help everybody, because as the bumper sticker states, not all who wander are lost. Not everybody who's in Dutch is trying to be saved from the Dutch that they find themselves in because they actually put themselves in that Dutch because they want the attention. They don't necessarily want the help, because if you give them the help, yeah, they get the attention for a little while, but then there's like nothing groovy or wonderful happening regarding all of this attention that they were getting when they had issues. Okay, I had a transient thought that's more for like an after meeting coffee conversation, so I'm not going to pass that on. That reminds me, so many times, I don't know if you guys do it, but if any of you speak on a regular basis, sometimes, well, I know for me, sometimes I will just get these thoughts of the most rancid, ridiculous, unheard of things, and I'm like, the next time I get a chance to speak, I'm going to say that. And whenever the next chance shows up for me to speak, I never think about it. Because, as I see it, not to be confused with, but on par with the guys who get into the long robes that show up for like furry podiums and talk from another book, like, every Sunday morning, that we are here as conduits for whatever the higher power has for the group. And that's it. We're not here to sell anything. We're not here to have anybody join our group, join our club. We're just here as a conduit, a channel, if you will. And that's just the way I see it, and that just seems to work out for me. Because I've literally, on 2 occasions, twice, and I've been at this like for over 3.5 decades now, twice, 2 times, I have tried to set up something that I'm going to share as I'm speaking. And literally both times, it's like the book was sitting right here. I didn't look at it once, I just went. Because I just see, just like I don't always know what's best for me, I definitely don't always know what's best for you, even though my ego will tell me that I know what's best for you. Give me 5 minutes, I'll tell you. But the reality is that guidance from the higher power will direct us to where we need to be in order to get the growth that we need to have, in order to make the contribution that we're supposed to make, and in order to find the friends and partners that we're supposed to love and get close to and help and be in support of and have them be in support of us. And as I've often said, I can do better. My higher power can do better for me than I can with guns and money. And that's simply the truth. It's been borne out through history. And let's see, what else we got here? I'm, like I said, there's so much sober stuff that I just didn't even take a chance to hit on, so I'll try and squeeze some of that in. I had always seen in movies where people would moon other people and, just for a fun thing. I never experienced a mooning until I got sober. From the people that I was with. So that's just one of those things. And so many times I've just been blessed, just blessed beyond belief. Like, I remember there was this one, actually it was my first sober Christmas. I was away for school, and I wound up spending Christmas with one of the people in my network out there. And that's just to express the importance of getting a network, connecting with your network, talking to your people, of course, talking to your sponsor, working through your steps, getting into service, and it's a life second to none. I'm here to tell you. Just, give it a shot. I would say give it half a shot, which reminds me of another thing that, the half a shot isn't really it, because they say in How It Works that rarely have we seen a person fail who has not thoroughly followed our plan. And half measures availed us nothing. And I remember hearing somebody in a meeting share one time that, wouldn't it be cool if half measures availed us at least half? No, it doesn't work that way. It's like you got to be all in, balls deep, neck deep, however deep you want to get it. And it's like the more you get into it, the more you want to get into it. The more you do, the more you want to do, because you're feeling, or at least I was feeling, the results in my heart as a person. I was no longer a piece of crap. I was no longer comfortable with the idea of people talking to me any kind of way. I was no longer just hoping and praying and begging for someone to pay attention to me, because I wasn't the focus. I'm not the focus. The focus is whomever I'm with, whomever I'm in support of, and I wind up getting support in return, and I don't do it to get the support in return, it just comes. And that's pretty much all I got to say about that. Thank you so very much for your time, and I appreciate you for being here. Thanks for letting me share.